League, a little thing called the Houston Texans, trying to reverse a pretty clear perception/reality of dysfunction, naming a new head coach today and then making him available to reporters. It was David Culley, the new coach, Nick Caserio, the new GM. Let's hear from both of them as it relates to the most important question surrounding not just the Texans, but the entire National Football League. What is the status of quarterback Deshaun Watson? Here they are.
The only thing I knew about this whole situation at that point is that I was being interviewed for this job to be the head coach. And I did know at that point, Deshaun Watson's a Houston Texan. He's a quarterback of the Houston Texans. And that's all that I was concerned about. And that's all I knew. And whatever was been said about what he wanted to do or he didn't want to do, all I know is this: having been in this business this long, he is a Houston Texan. And I want him to be a Houston Texan. And the reason I'm in this position today is because I knew he's going to be a Houston Texan.
Organizationally, just want to reiterate our commitment to Deshaun Watson. He's had a great impact on this organization, a great impact on a lot of people, a great impact on this team. And we look forward to the opportunity to spend more time with him here this spring once we get started. And, we have zero interest in trading the player. We have a great plan, a great vision for him and for this team and his role on our team. And we look forward to the opportunity to spend more time with him here this spring.
That was Nick Caserio. Before that, David Culley. Now Charean Williams joining us. I'm sure, Charean, you either heard just now or heard earlier today the things that Culley and Caserio had to say about Deshaun Watson. What was your first reaction when you hear the words, you see the delivery, and you get a chance to really think through the message they're sending?
I think they want to keep Deshaun Watson, but I don't know if that's going to be possible, Mike. He has made it clear that he wants out. Now, how they work that out, I don't know. How that evolves, I don't know. But this is going to kill the Houston Texans, Mike.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was studying every aspect of the press conference today for some sort of a clue, some sort of a sign. Are they planning to draw a hard line, or are they just saying what they have to say, like Rick Spielman, the Vikings GM 8 years ago, when Percy Harvin was rumored to be available in trade, the catchphrase from Spielman, and I still remind him of it all the time: we have no intent to trade Percy Harvin. Percy Harvin was traded a couple of days after he made that statement. Zero interest in trading Deshaun Watson, to me, means nothing. When it's snowing out and it's garbage night and it's time to take the bags out to the cans that are through 6 inches of snow, I have no interest in doing it, but I do it. So I heard nothing, and not just from that comment, I heard nothing that causes me to think they are taking a hardline position. A couple of additional snippets from Caserio that I think are relevant. Let's begin with his comment after John McClain of the Houston Chronicle asked Caserio what they intend to do to try to salvage the relationship with Watson. Here's Caserio.
The best way that you handle relationships is to communicate and be honest and be forthright. And we're going to do that with everybody that's in this building, from equipment to training staff to coaching staff to personnel to players.
Yeah, look, you have to establish a line of communication before you can have the communication, Charean. The problem is, if he won't talk to Nick Caserio, if he won't talk to David Culley, if he won't talk to Cal McNair, how do you change his mind? If his mind's made up and he's built a wall and he's taken your number out of his phone, if he's left the chat, if he's gone, if he's over, you can't communicate with him. He talked about getting him in there in the spring. Well, 95% of the offseason program, if they even have one this year, is voluntary. He doesn't have to show up. So they've got a lot of work to do before they even get to have the conversation. It's too late to have the conversation. You can't salvage without the conversation.
Mike, you talked about if your boss calls, you answer the phone, even if you're on vacation, and he didn't do that. And he's obviously not answering their calls now. So, it's now up to Nick Caserio and David Culley to clean up the mess that was created by Cal McNair and Jack Easterby. And they've got to try to do that, and I don't think they have a chance to do that because of the mess that Easterby and McNair made of this. And it's a huge mess, and it's unfortunate for the Houston Texans and their fans. Houston Texans fans deserve better. This team deserves better. This organization does not deserve better, and they don't deserve Deshaun Watson. And he's not answering his phone, Mike. If I'm David Culley, I leave a message, which I'm sure he's already done now. And then I get Lamar Jackson to call him. And then I get other players that Deshaun Watson would have played under me, Tyreek Hill, whoever it is, to call Deshaun Watson. And I would keep having those players call, various players. I don't know if that's going to work. I don't think it is. I think once you ask for a trade, as you said repeatedly, Mike, the bridge has been burned down. There's no turning back at this point.
And David Culley's comments on the situation were a little bit confusing. He said, I'm in this position because I know Deshaun Watson's going to be here. That's just a guess. That's not information from Deshaun Watson. There was no suggestion that any of those guys have spoken with Deshaun Watson and gotten any sort of commitment. There was nothing to push back against the accepted narrative that he wants out. It's a given that he wants out. The question is, how do they turn it around? Another comment from Caserio that caught my attention, and we'll listen to it right here. Caserio was asked by another reporter about the timeline for figuring this out with Deshaun Watson. Let's listen to what Caserio had to say.
There's going to be some player decisions that we're going to have to make. So I think right now we're just going to take it one day at a time, focus on what we can control and what we can handle. Today, the day is about David. And, once we get through here today with David, the next thing we'll turn to is staff construction. And, we're going to spend as much time as possible on that and what the vision is for the team and what the staff has in mind as well. So we're just going to take it one day at a time and just try to make good decisions one day at a time and, do what we think is best for the organization.
SHIREEN, that was the moment where I concluded they are going to trade him and that the door is open to trade him and that anyone out there who's interested in trading for him should start submitting offers unsolicited to the Houston Texans, and eventually someone will make them an offer they won't and can't refuse. Because if you ask Nick Caserio, what's the timeline for making a decision? The answer, if the decision is we're not trading him, is there is no timeline. We're not trading him. There's no timeline. He's a member of this team. He can play with us or he can play for no one. He has a contract that covers the next 4 years. He is our quarterback. We want him to be here, and we will wait for him as long as it takes. And if he chooses to exercise his rights under the CBA to stay away from the offseason program, the mandatory minicamp, training camp, preseason, regular season, that's his right. But we're not going anywhere because we want him on this team, and we're here to tell our fans that he is a member of this team, and he's not going anywhere. And if you say anything other than that, you're telling the rest of the league in not as many words, make us an offer, and eventually we won't refuse it.
Yeah, I do think the door is open. If they get an offer they can't refuse, Mike, and I'm expecting them to get an offer they can't refuse. And I'm expecting a lot of teams to get in on the bidding and call and say, hey, even if you're not listening, here's what we're offering if you are listening, if you ever are listening. And they do have a little bit of time here. And if they keep saying we're not trading him, maybe that helps the value go up in this thing, Mike. And maybe they figure out that they're not going to be able to work things out with Deshaun Watson when he doesn't answer their phone calls and doesn't respond and repeatedly says, I want to be traded through his agent. At some point, something has to give, Mike. But, this organization has not earned any credibility at this point, I think, with what they've done in recent years, not just months, but years. And I have no faith that they're going to have this play out in their favor. I mean, I know it's a different GM. I get it's a different regime, but the Texans have been the Texans for so long that you just don't think that they're going to do this the right way, that they're going to do the best for the organization. I mean, we've seen it so many times. You go back to Jadeveon Clowney, even back to Dwayne Brown, to DeAndre Hopkins, to Laramie Tunsil, all the trades they have made, Mike, they came out on the losing end of those trades, whether they were giving away players or getting players they gave up too much for. You look at Jadeveon Clowney, Mike, they waited so long to trade him that they didn't get what he was worth. And I could see the same scenario playing out for the Texans.
And they had to pay roughly $7 million of Jadeveon Clowney's salary to get the deal done that got them a mid-round pick and a couple of players in return. And, you know, there are some questions and concerns that football fans raise as it relates to this entire situation. And one of the questions is, why in the world would the Texans even consider doing this? How does it get to that point that they would consider it? They should never even consider it. The problem is they've let it get to the point where the guy wants out. The damage is already done. They've already screwed up whatever it is that they were able to screw up to get their franchise quarterback. Just, 6 months? Not even that? After signing this long-term contract, he's decided, I want out. That's on the team for failing to have the right relationship, the right atmosphere, the right everything that makes your franchise quarterback want to be there for the entirety of his career. And he's privy to things from being on the inside that we're not. We've picked up some of it through the excellent reporting of folks like Jenny Vrentas and Greg Bishop of SI.com. But I assume Watson knows even more about how nuts it's gotten, for lack of a better term, within the Texans organization, and it's driven him to the point where he wants out. That's on the Texans for having a dysfunctional shop. That's not on the person who's reacting to the dysfunction by saying, I got to get the hell out of here.
The only thing I would say, Mike, is it's on Deshaun Watson for signing that contract in September. And I know it was, $156 million? But he knew they'd already traded DeAndre Hopkins. He knew they didn't have a very good roster. And he knew that Bill O'Brien was still the head coach and the GM, and Jack Easterby was there, and all those things were in place. So I'm surprised that he signed the extension, and now it has him in this position looking to be traded when he does have a no-trade clause, obviously, and can dictate sort of where he goes, kind of, sort of. So, you know, they're both in this mess for reasons, and I don't know how it works out in the end, but it's going to be fascinating to watch for however long it plays out. It's going to be the top storyline. We're going to be talking about this every single day, Mike, and I absolutely love it.
One other thing about the contract, because you make a great point, and it dovetails with other questions that I get from people. He signed a contract. He has a contract. All he had to do was say, I don't want the extension. Well, at the time, maybe he hadn't come to the conclusion that I need to get the hell out of this place that has become a dysfunctional hellhole. Secondly, you don't say no to generational wealth. You clean up the mess on the back end once you acquire the generational wealth and the reward for what you've already done. The current labor deal doesn't give the players the reward on the way in. It gives them the reward after they've put in a few years. In Deshaun Watson's mind, it's fair to conclude, I got paid for what I've done, not necessarily for what I'm going to do. And finally, let's remember, because there's always going to be an old school football guy that goes on TV or on radio and says he signed a contract, he needs to honor it. There are two contracts that apply to every player in the National Football League. One, the contract between him and his team. Two, the contract between all players and all teams, known as the collective bargaining agreement, and it gives players clear rights to withhold services if they're willing to pay a $50,000 per day fine for skipping training camp, if they're willing to pay back signing bonus money they haven't earned yet, if they retire, if they sit out a full season. They're not forced to work. They have rights. And even if they're technically violating the terms of their individual contract, they're fully within their rights, SHIREEN, under the broader contract. And this is a great reminder of that dynamic because, yes, technically he's not honoring his contract, but technically he is because his contract is backed up by the CBA.
And my modern era players are so empowered now. I mean, we've seen it. And when you start, I'm sure we're going to talk later about Jimmy Johnson and what he said, that he wouldn't trade Deshaun Watson no matter what they offered, even if it was Herschel Walker-like trade compensation. But let's go back to that time. There was no free agency. Players weren't empowered. It was different. There was no salary cap. Things were different then than they are now. Empowered players do have power, and they can dictate things about even if they have a contract, where they want to go. They can hold up. There's all sorts of things they can do that they couldn't do in the past that is in now. And Deshaun Watson is absolutely exercising that right. And I have a feeling if the Texans don't trade him, I don't think we're going to see him. And I don't think we're going to see him for a while. Maybe it's like Dwayne Brown. Maybe he holds out into the season until they finally say, okay, he's really not coming back.
And it's better to not see him than to have him show up and be the equivalent of Jalen Ramsey, where he's not practicing because of an injury that otherwise he would practice with if he was happy about his circumstance. Right, the injury. If he's not showing up early, staying late, studying the playbook, influencing and leading the team. Now, I don't think he's wired that way, but if I'm the Texans, I don't want to push that. I don't want to find out. I'd rather just pull the plug on it and realize that my best interests are to do a deal before the draft, ideally before the start of free agency on March 17, because if you wait until after that to work out terms, teams that may have been interested may make other plans. You want to get this done. If you're the Texans, you want to maximize value. You want to get it done before March 17, and then you want to formalize it when the new league year begins at 4:01 p.m. Eastern. That should be the objective by the Houston Texans. Whether or not they're smart enough to figure that out remains to be seen, because they're not smart enough, as recent history has shown us, to make their franchise quarterback happy and otherwise make good decisions about how the team is going to be operated. All right, they are hiring Lovie Smith to be the defensive coordinator. He's been out of the NFL for 5 years. He was jettisoned by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in what, and you know what, Dirk Cutter's retired now, so I can say it. People thought it was a palace coup. People thought it was an inside job, much like it was when John Gruden was fired for Raheem Morris. The thinking was they fired Lovie Smith for Dirk Cutter because Dirk Cutter was drawing interest elsewhere, and he was the guy who was supposed to get the most out of Jameis Winston. Now, after 5 years, I haven't followed college football that closely over the past 5 years, but I get the impression he wasn't very good as the head coach at Illinois. Now he gets to be the defensive coordinator, SHIREEN, at the Houston Texans.
And it's a good move, frankly, for David Culley to surround himself with guys who have been head coaches previously, because he has no head coaching experience. And as everyone's pointed out, he has no coordinator experience. So he needs a veteran guy, and Lovie is certainly that. They didn't overlap in Tampa. Lovie came in after David Culley left Tampa. But I do think they've gone way back and know each other. I don't think they've ever worked together before, but they do know each other. So I think this is a good pickup for the Texans. I think he's added some really good coaches, but the facts are they don't have very many good players, and that's what you win with.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.